I just closed a multi-billion-dollar merger in London and came home a day early, hoping to surprise my wife, Ava. Instead, I found her getting a little too cozy with her new artistic director and discovered she'd loaned him the vintage Shelby GT 500 I'd spent years restoring myself. That car was more than just metal to me. I told her I wanted it back now. She just laughed. A few years as CEO of the Bancroft Corporation, and you've forgotten your place, haven't you? You married into this family. Her voice was like ice. It's just a car. I could do what I want with it. It was then I realized Ava's heart had quietly drifted away from me. And if she valued my devotion so little, well, the Bancroft Corporation itself could just as easily change hands. I cut my trip short by a day, but I never expected to overhear her conversation with Hector, our house manager. Ma'am, that car. It means the world to Mr. Hayes. You just gave it away. I just loaned it to Julian for a couple of days. He needs it for inspiration. He'll bring it back in a little while. Ava's voice cut through the manicured hedges of our penthouse terrace, each word a hammer blow to my heart. Hector, don't worry about it. But the boss, he'll have my head if he finds out. This is a Bancroft penthouse. Ava's tone turned sharp and cold. And Ethan Hayes works for my family. Do you listen to him? Or do you listen to me? I couldn't hear anymore. I cleared my throat loudly and pushed open the terrace door. Ava and Hector both flinched, their faces a mask of shock. They clearly hadn't expected me back so soon. Ethan, Ava recovered first, that familiar, practiced smile sliding back on her face. What are you doing home already? Wanted to surprise you, I said, my hand staying in my pocket, clutching the diamond necklace I'd bought for her in London. I walked straight to the edge of the terrace, looking down at the street-level garage. Through the reinforced glass, I could see the empty space where my prized possession should have been. My meticulously restored, midnight blue 1967 Shelby GT 500, a symbol of our family's success and, once, our deep love. Now it was just gone. She'd so carelessly given it away. Where's the Shelby? Hector stammered, afraid to meet my eyes. But Ava just smiled, walking to my side and linking her arm through mine. Oh, the engine was making a funny noise the other day. I had it taken to a specialist for a tune-up. She patted my arm. It'll be back in a few days, don't you worry. Is that right? I didn't call her on the lie. I just nodded. At dinner, I mentioned that I hadn't been back to my own place in Brooklyn for a while. I asked if she would spend the weekend there with me. Ava put down her fork, her expression souring. I can't this weekend. I've already promised to meet with Julian to go over the design concepts for the new Bancroft real estate project. Julian? What consultant is this? First I'm hearing of it. I frowned. Suddenly, Ava's eyes lit up, as if I'd just turned on a switch. She launched into a breathless introduction of the artistic consultant the Bancroft Corporation had hired for a staggering sum. Julian Croft is the most sought-after emerging artist in New York City. A single one of his paintings can sell for millions. A blush of excitement colored her cheeks. You have no idea how famous he is. Other companies would kill to have him on retainer. I stared quietly at the woman across the table, this stranger, a chill spreading through my chest. There was a time when she would have dropped everything for me, no matter how busy she was. Now, for an outsider, she wouldn't even come home with me for a weekend. I had my assistant look into this Julian Croft. A moment later, a link to his upcoming gallery exhibition hit my inbox. I tapped it open. My pupils constricted. Front and center on the promotional material was a high-gloss, artistic photo of a car. A midnight blue 1967 Shelby GT 500. I zoomed in on the fender. The unique, hand-painted silver pinstripe, my signature touch, was unmistakable. It was my car. Underneath the photo, the caption read, "From the private collection of Julian Croft." I tossed the phone onto the table in front of Ava. Explain this. How did my Shelby become part of Julian Croft's private collection? Ava, who had been lifting a coffee cup to her lips, froze. The cup clattered against the saucer. It's just a picture, Ethan. It's a similar car, that's all. Is it? I said with a cold laugh, swiping to another photo. Then I suppose this custom pinstripe is just a coincidence, too? You think you could find another one like it in the entire country? The living room was terrifyingly silent, the only sound the ticking of the grandfather clock, marking the seconds of our unraveling marriage. Fine. I gave him the car, she said, standing up to face me, her chin defiant. He's designing the entire marketing campaign for the new Bancroft Tower. He said he needed a muse, some inspiration, and he fell in love with our car. A muse. The words were acid in my mouth. So you just gave it to him? It wasn't just a gift. Ava's voice rose, her defensiveness flaring. It was for the Bancroft project. Do you know how in demand Julian is? His campaign could double our sales projections. Get it back, I said through gritted teeth. It's just a car, she shot back, her voice climbing. Why are you making such a huge deal out of this? God, Ethan, you could be so petty. This woman, she had the audacity to call me petty. Just a car? I repeated each word slowly and deliberately. That was my passion project. I spent 3 years of my life restoring it. It was our engagement gift to ourselves. Well, why did you have to give it away? You said it yourself. Ours. You just married into the family. Ava's face was flushed with anger. That car belongs to the Bancrofts. I'm a Bancroft. I have every right. Married in. I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. The last bit of warmth in my heart was extinguished by her words. I'd almost forgotten. It's true, I married into the Bancroft family. But in 10 years, I've bled for this company, and I always thought our marriage was a partnership. Hearing you say that, it's like a bucket of ice water. Ethan, calm down. Seeing the look on my face, Ava's tone softened slightly. I didn't know you were this attached to it. You didn't know? I cut her off. Get the car back. Now. Today. She hesitated. I'll talk to Julian, but he really loves that car. I'll have to find the right time, ease him into it. I watched her, the way she couldn't meet my eyes, and suddenly it was all so clear. She was still performing, still stalling, still trying to manage the feelings of this other man. So that's what this was. It wasn't about the car. It was about her heart. Fine. I nodded, getting up to leave the room. You take your time. Find the perfect moment. I reached the doorway and glanced back. The look of relief on her face told me everything I needed to know. Our marriage was over. As expected, Ava didn't get the car back. Instead, she came to me with a proposal to pour more money into Julian Croft's art exhibition. Ethan, Julian's show is still short on funding. I was thinking the company could make an additional investment. I used to think I could read every emotion in her eyes. Now, looking at her was like trying to understand a beautifully crafted mask. I put down the financial report I was reading and studied her. The company is leveraged to the hilt on the new tower project. There's no spare cash. Why are you being so cheap? Ava actually pouted. If Julian succeeds, it opens up a whole new network for the Bancroft brand in the art world. Seeing my stony expression, she huffed. Fine, I'll use my own money. I didn't say another word, pretending it was a minor issue I didn't care about. Privately, I instructed my assistant to run a full financial workup on Ava's recent spending, especially any transactions connected to Julian Croft. A day later, the report was on my desk. I opened the first page, and the numbers were staggering. Ava hadn't just used her personal accounts. She had illegally funneled a substantial sum from a restricted capital fund. Seed money my own family had invested in the Bancroft Corporation, specifically earmarked for technology, R&D. She'd used it to buy Julian a luxury condo in Soho, a brand new sports car, and to bankroll his entire exhibition. That's Julian's new Lamborghini. Sticker price, $680,000. My assistant pointed to a photo of the ostentatious vehicle. The license plate is AVA S. Boy. I let out a low hum. Ava S. Boy. Classy. At the end of the day, she's still the majority shareholder, my assistant added, his expression uneasy. I leaned back, slowly massaging my temples as memories flooded my mind. Years ago, a dying Mr. Bancroft had gripped my hand. Ethan, he'd said, his voice weak, you're the most capable man I've ever met. Ava is my only child. Please help her. Help our family. I couldn't refuse the old man who had been my mentor. I agreed to marry his daughter and take the reins of his company. Back then, the gratitude and love in Ava's eyes were so real. I thought we would build a life together. But for the last 10 years, while I may have married in, I was the one running the show, the one who turned a regional player into a national powerhouse. To honor my promise, I'd even used my own family's capital and connections to pave the way for the Bancroft Corporation's success. And now, it seemed I'd just been fattening the calf for someone else's slaughter. I closed my eyes for a moment. Make digital and physical backups of all this evidence, I told my assistant. Every last transaction. Don't miss a single one. A few days later, a gold-embossed invitation was lying on my desk. It was for Julian Croft's gallery opening. Tucked inside was a handwritten note. Looking forward to your guidance, Mr. Hayes. The handwriting was arrogant and flamboyant, each loop and stroke dripping with a self-satisfaction that turned my stomach. My assistant stood by, looking nervous. Sir, should I check with Mrs. Hayes to see if you'll be attending? No need. I closed the invitation, a cold smile on my lips. Get a few of the top art critics from Art Forum and the Times on the phone. Tell them Ethan Hayes wants to buy them a drink. This was a declaration of war. He really thought I wouldn't show up. On the night of the exhibition, I arrived early and alone, finding an unobtrusive corner from which to watch. I was a hunter patiently waiting for the prey to walk in my trap. As expected, Ava made a grand entrance, dressed in a six-figure gown I'd bought her. She was clinging to Julian Croft's arm, the two of them whispering and laughing intimately like a pair of triumphant lovers. Julian, with his arm possessively around Ava's waist, stood at the podium to give the opening remarks. He barely spoke about his creative process. Instead, he delivered a long, gushing thank you to Ava for her unwavering support, and then began to brag about the Shelby GT500. In his telling, the car I had poured my soul into had become a treasure he had personally curated, a priceless artifact, his artistic muse. As the room filled with applause, I stood in the back, smiling coldly. The sheer audacity was almost impressive. Just then, Ava's gaze swept across the crowd and locked with mine. Her smile froze instantly. The color drained from her face, and she guiltily looked away. Julian, however, was oblivious. He swaggered toward me, pulling Ava along, and extended a hand, a victor's smirk plastered on his face. "Mr. Hayes, I didn't think you'd actually grace us with your presence. Thank you for supporting the arts." I ignored his hand. My eyes flickered down to where his hand rested on Ava's waist, as if I'd seen something unclean. Mrs. Hayes's commitment to the arts is truly exhaustive. My voice was ice. I turned to Ava, my eyes boring into her. "What are you doing here?" she managed to ask, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm here to show my support, of course." All around us, the critics I had invited were beginning their tour, their voices rising as they discussed the works. Soon, a chorus of criticism filled the air. "The composition is hollow, technically adolescent. This is commercial hype masquerading as artistic value." One well-known critic addressed Julian directly. "Mr. Croft, could you enlighten us as to how you secured such substantial sponsorship? The work itself hardly seems to justify this level of investment." The smugness vanished from Julian's face, replaced by a flicker of panic. Ava tried to intervene. "Artistic value is subjective. I believe Julian's work." As a murmur went through the crowd, I walked slowly toward the center of the gallery. A massive, wall-sized photograph of the Shelby, titled Midnight Muse, dominated the space. I stood before it, studying it closely, then raised my voice. "Mr. Croft's work is certainly lifelike." I paused, my gaze locking onto his, especially the unique, hand-painted silver pinstripe on the fender. It's identical to the one on a car that recently went missing from my private garage. The gallery went dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop. It was a priceless vehicle I spent years restoring, a cherished possession. I took a step closer, my voice sharper, my gaze like a physical force. "I'm just curious, Mr. Croft. Where did you find your muse?" The room erupted. Guests, critics, reporters, all eyes were on us. "The brochure says the car is his private collection, but Mr. Hayes is saying it was stolen. Is he accusing him?" The whispers grew louder. Julian's face was ashen. He avoided my eyes, trying to maintain his composure. "You must be mistaken, Mr. Hayes. A coincidence, perhaps." Ava could no longer stand it. She rushed to my side, her voice a furious, low hiss. "Ethan, are you out of your mind?" Her eyes were red with fury. "Do you know what tonight means? You have to make a scene, to humiliate us like this. Just a car, remember? Why are you getting so upset in front of everyone?" My face was stone. I didn't back down an inch. "Humiliate you?" I shot back, my voice dangerously cold. "What's more humiliating, Ava? Me asking a simple question about the origin of a photograph, or someone stealing something that belongs to me and brazenly putting it on display?" I stared directly into her eyes, my voice like shattering ice. "Tell me, Ava, how many other things that belong to me have you given to Mr. Croft? Ethan, are you trying to ruin this night on purpose?" Ava was livid. She spun around and went back to Julian, defiantly leaning into his embrace. "Julian's talent is self-evident. Stop making these baseless accusations." Julian straightened up, a smug look returning to his face. "That's right, Mr. Hayes. Ava gave me the car as a gift." He raised his voice, ensuring everyone could hear. "You're just a man who married into the Bancroft family. Do you really think Ava needs your permission to give away Bancroft property?" He sneered. "Don't forget your place." The whispers around us grew into a buzz. "That's right. The car, this company, everything, it's all mine." Ava held her head high, a triumphant smirk on her lips. "I'll give what I want to whomever I want. You have no say in it, Ethan Hayes." I watched as she reached up and adjusted Julian's tie in a slow, deliberate gesture of intimacy. "Forget the car. You don't even have a say in the Bancroft Corporation." The room fell silent for a beat, then erupted in gasps. A dozen smartphones were now pointed directly at us. I laughed, a sound devoid of all humor. Right? Bancroft property. And I have no say. My voice was low and dangerous. I ran this company for 10 years, poured my blood and sweat into it. And now I'm an outsider. My assistant appeared at my elbow and handed me a file. I pulled out the divorce papers and held them out to Ava. Since that's the case, I don't want a single thing from the Bancrofts. Ava, sign it. From this moment on, we owe each other nothing. Ava's arrogant expression froze, then crumbled into panic. She clearly never expected me to pull a move like this in public. Divorce? She shrieked. Ethan Hayes, you dare ask me for a divorce in front of everyone. I looked at the woman I had once loved, my heart now a dead, cold stone. 10 years of my life turned to ash and scattered on the floor of this pretentious gallery. After a moment of silence, I slowly pulled out my phone, brought up the financial records I had prepared, and turned the brightness to maximum. You can either choose to end this with a shred of dignity, I said, my voice low but carrying through the silent room, or I can publicly detail exactly how you embezzled restricted funds from my family's trust to finance your artist's lavish lifestyle. Your choice. Julian looked as if he'd been struck by lightning. His eyes darted around the room, and his hand instinctively dropped from Ava's waist. Ava, he whispered urgently, you always said he was too controlling. He's just a guy who married in. Let him go. Don't make a bigger scene. His only concern was his own reputation. Ava, fighting for the last scrap of her pride, her fingers digging into Julian's arm, finally snapped. Fine, I'll sign. She snatched the papers and the pen from my hand. I can't wait to see what becomes of you, Ethan Hayes, when you don't have the Bancroft family to hide behind. Leaving the gallery, the roar of the crowd was cut off by the heavy thud of my car door, sealing me in a silent world of my own. The divorce papers on the passenger seat felt heavier than any multi-billion-dollar contract I had ever signed. The car pulled up to the curb in front of my brownstone in Brooklyn Heights. I walked alone into the home I hadn't visited in months. The faint, familiar scent of old books and cedar filled the air. This was my sanctuary, not the cold, opulent penthouse that belonged to the Bancrofts. Mr. Hayes, the Bancroft board members have called over a dozen times. They want to speak with you urgently, my assistant, Greg, said, handing me a cup of coffee. Ignore them. Also, Greg pulled a file from his briefcase. You asked me to do a deep dive on Julian Croft. The results are in. I took the report and scanned it quickly. The so-called artist was nothing more than a con man. He had no formal training, just a fabricated story about studying abroad that he'd used to worm his way into the art scene. Even better, he had 2 prior fraud convictions, both settled out of court. Quite the resume, I said with a cold smirk. Leak this report to the press, and make sure to give a heads up to all the collectors who bought his work. In the days that followed, I made no public statements. I just quietly began the process of pulling every dollar of my family's capital and every joint project away from the Bancroft Corporation. This, of course, gave Ava and Julian a false sense of security. They thought the divorce was just a temper tantrum, an emotional outburst. Sure enough, within 2 weeks, the tabloids were filled with stories of Ava Bancroft's lavish spending on her new beau. She paraded Julian through New York's most exclusive restaurants and clubs, spending money like it was water. The con man, under the guise of celebrating their new life and expanding his artistic enterprise, encouraged her to burn through cash. Luxury cars, priceless watches, antique art. Nothing was off limits. On the news one night, I saw Ava at a press conference announcing Bancroft's latest venture, a $10 billion international arts and culture center. She stood at the podium, speaking passionately, while Julian stood just behind her, a greedy, triumphant glint in his eyes. That one project was enough to suffocate the already cash-strapped company. She's really going all in, Greg remarked beside me. No, I said with a slight smile. She's trying to prove she can run things without me. I took a sip of whiskey. A pity she has such terrible judgment. With my family's capital gone, several of Bancroft's key projects ground to a halt. The company's credit lines began to freeze. I received a steady stream of worried messages from old, loyal employees. Julian Croft was acting like the company's COO, making major executive decisions. To satisfy his endless demands, Ava had started embezzling directly from corporate accounts. I didn't respond. I just waited, like a hunter watching his prey wander deeper and deeper into the snare. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Ava. You think you're so important, Ethan. I'm still the head of the Bancroft Corporation without you. Attached was a photo of her and Julian at a nightclub, surrounded by champagne bottles and flowers, her expression a deliberate, mocking sneer. I smiled and sent back a simple thumbs-up emoji. Greg knocked on my office door. "Sir," he said, a note of excitement in his voice. "We have it all. Every illegal transfer, every embezzled dollar. It's all documented. Are we ready to make our move? Every record of Ava's financial dealings with Julian, every detail of the embezzled funds, every secretly taken photo of their meetings. It was all packaged and anonymously delivered to the core members of the Bancroft Board, the SEC, and a handful of the country's most reputable financial news outlets." The next morning, the story exploded across the New York business world. The Bancroft Corporation stock opened by hitting the circuit breaker, plummeting before trading was halted. The floor of the NYSE was chaos. Bancroft Corp implicated in massive financial fraud. Heiress Ava Bancroft embezzled millions for lover. Artist Julian Croft's fraudulent past exposed. The headlines were relentless. Hashtag Bancroft Crisis was the #1 trending topic on Twitter. I sat peacefully in my office, sipping my coffee, as my phone vibrated nonstop with calls from Bancroft board members. They were suddenly desperate to get in touch with the former son-in-law they had once scorned, begging me to step in and save them. Inside the Bancroft Tower, an emergency board meeting was descending into anarchy. "Ava, this evidence is irrefutable. You have to explain this to us." The CFO slammed his hand on the table. "As a majority shareholder, I have the authority to direct company funds as I see fit." Ava stood defiantly in the center of the room, trying to maintain control. "It was a temporary project investment." "An investment?" The head of marketing scoffed. "Was buying your artistic consultant a Lamborghini also an investment? I am ordering you as the head of this family. Don't you dare talk about family," one of the oldest board members shouted, cutting her off. "When your father was alive, this company was never in such disgrace. If it weren't for the foundation Ethan Hayes built over the last 10 years, Bancroft would have collapsed long ago." "Ethan Hayes?" Ava spat his name like poison. "What does he have to do with this?" "I moved to immediately freeze all funds related to Julian Croft and his affiliated projects," the CFO announced. Seconded. The room was in an uproar. Ava's hand trembled as she picked up her phone. She realized Julian hadn't answered her calls in days. She fired off 10 frantic texts. They were all marked as read, with no reply. The steady drip of news stories had become a flood, drowning her and the company in scandal. "Ms. Bancroft, 3 different banks have frozen our accounts. Our suppliers are calling in their debts." Ava rubbed her temples, her heavy makeup failing to hide her exhaustion. The desk was piled high with legal notices and letters from creditors, but she couldn't focus. It had been 3 days since she'd heard from Julian, aside from a few dismissive texts. A private investigator she'd hired sent a new update. Julian was on the dark web, trying to find buyers to quickly offload the collection of fine art Ava had spent years acquiring. Ignoring the protests of the board, she stormed out and drove to Julian's Soho studio. The lights were on, the curtains drawn. Ava let herself in through the back and found him frantically wrapping several valuable paintings. A packed suitcase, a passport, and a plane ticket sat on the floor beside him. "Planning a trip?" Ava asked coldly. Julian spun around, startled, but quickly regained his composure. "Ava, perfect timing. I was just about to call you." "Call me about what?" "About how you're secretly selling off my entire collection." Ava held up her phone, displaying screenshots of his conversations with a black market buyer. "Or should we talk about this plane ticket?" Switzerland. Nice." Julian's eyes darted around. He dropped the pretense, a cruel smirk spreading across his face. "Well, the cat's out of the bag. No point in pretending anymore." "Ava, you are so unbelievably stupid. Did you really think I loved you? You were my walking ATM," he roared with laughter. "Do you know what I thought the first time I saw you? The great Ava Bancroft. What a fat sheep, ready for shearing." He gestured wildly around the room. "Everyone called me a con man, but you kept shoveling money at me. Who was I to say no?" Ava's face was chalk white. "The money I gave you. The paintings. All sold," Julian announced proudly, like a hunter showing off his trophies. "The money is already safe in my Swiss account." He kicked open his suitcase, revealing stacks of cash and luxury watches. "See this? This is real. Not like love, which is just an illusion." Ava lunged for the suitcase, but Julian shoved her hard. She stumbled backward, hitting the wall and doubling over in pain. "Ethan was right to dump you," he sneered. "You have nothing to offer but your money. You liar. You monster." Enraged beyond reason, Ava grabbed a heavy bronze sculpture from a pedestal and swung it with all her might at Julian's head. He tried to dodge, but it was too late. The metal connected with a sickening crack. He let out a choked scream and crumpled to the floor. Blood pooled from the side of his head as his body twitched once, then lay still. Julian Croft didn't die, but the severe traumatic brain injury left him partially paralyzed, permanently disabled. The first thing he did upon waking was talk to the police, painting himself as the innocent victim of a manipulative predator. Ava was charged with embezzlement, commercial fraud, and aggravated assault. Even with the most expensive legal team in New York, the message was clear. There was no getting out of this. She tried to contact me through every channel possible. "Ethan, please help me." Her voice on the phone was trembling, laced with a humility I had never heard before. "Ethan, I know I was wrong. I was blind." I calmly hung up and blocked her number. More calls followed, from burner phones, then texts, then even some of the old Bancroft family retainers showing up at my door. I never appeared. I never responded. On the day of Ava's sentencing, I didn't go to the courthouse. I watched the live feed from the comfort of my library in Brooklyn. Julian was wheeled into the courtroom, putting on an Oscar-worthy performance. He tremulously pointed a shaking finger at Ava. "I trusted her," he sobbed. "I shared my artistic dreams with her. She used my innocence, drained my creativity, and then she tried to kill me." The flashbulbs from the press corps went off like a strobe light. Julian dabbed at his dry eyes, a gesture he had clearly rehearsed. "Now I'm useless. I can't even hold a paintbrush." Ava's face was numb, her eyes dead. "Does the defendant have anything to say?" the judge asked. Ava shook her head, her voice a dry rasp. "No, I'm guilty." 3 months later, I visited Ava in prison as a representative of her primary creditor. The woman on the other side of the glass was almost unrecognizable. She wore a faded prison jumpsuit, her body gaunt, her eyes hollow and empty. After a moment of silence, I got straight to the point. "I'm acquiring the Bancroft Corporation." A muscle twitched in her cheek, pulling her lips into a bitter smile. "So, you finally get what you always wanted." "I'll keep the Bancroft name, out of respect for your father," I told her. "Cleaning up this mess will be a nightmare, but it'll be worth it." She stared at me, a sudden fire in her dead eyes. Her fingers trembled as she gripped the phone receiver. "You were planning this from the beginning, weren't you?" Her voice rose. "From the moment you found out about the car, you were waiting for this, weren't you?" "Was it you?" she screamed, heedless of the guards. "Did you hire someone to investigate me? Did you leak the story to the press? Did you destroy my life?" I smiled calmly, a picture of tranquility. "You did all of this to yourself, Ava. It had nothing to do with me." I stood up to leave. "Do your time. Be well." I paused at the door. "Oh, and one more thing I forgot to tell you. I got the Shelby back. It's sitting in my garage in Brooklyn Heights, polished and purring like a kitten. Turns out that car really does change a family's fortunes. Mine. Under my leadership, Hayes Industries became the dominant force in New York's business world within 2 years. I was closing 9-figure deals on a weekly basis, my corporate empire expanding like wildfire. But none of it was as satisfying as the moment I signed the papers to acquire the once mighty Bancroft Corporation for 10 cents on the dollar. "Mr. Hayes, the Bancroft board is waiting for you in the conference room," Greg said, handing me the final acquisition agreement. I pushed open the doors. The same arrogant board members who had once looked down their noses at me now stood with their heads bowed, their backs bent. "Gentlemen," I said, my gaze sweeping across the room, "today is the day the Bancroft Corporation is reborn. Hayes Industries will not let it die, but neither will we tolerate inefficiency or corruption." I completely restructured the company, integrated my own core technology, and injected $300 million to upgrade their entire infrastructure. Within 6 months, the dying enterprise had miraculously become profitable again, a cash cow for my larger conglomerate. In the world of business, victory is all that matters. One Thursday, the Wall Street Journal ran a full-page feature on the resurrection of the Bancroft brand. "Sir, we have an update on Julian Croft," Greg said, placing a thin file on my desk. Julian had avoided prison time, but his disability meant he could never paint again. He tried to monetize his infamy by selling his story and threatening to leak more details about his affair with Ava. But a single cease and desist letter from my legal team silenced him for good. Without the media spotlight, he quickly faded into obscurity. He set up a small easel in Times Square. "Sells charcoal portraits to tourists," Greg said, showing me a photo of Julian, haggard and disheveled, hunched over in his wheelchair on a crowded street corner. "Karma," I said, closing the file without a second glance. 5 years later, on a warm summer evening, I left a charity gala at Lincoln Center and decided to walk along the river. The setting sun cast a golden glow on the water. In the distance, the laughter of tourists on a ferry drifted on the breeze. A stooped figure collecting cans from a trash bin caught my eye. It was Ava. 5 years in prison had completely erased the proud, peacock-like woman she once was. She looked up and recognized me, her first instinct to shrink away in shame. But then, as if making a decision, she walked toward me. Ethan. Her voice was a ragged whisper. I can't believe I'm seeing you here. How long have you been out? I asked. 3 months, she said, her eyes fixed on the pavement. I'm in a shelter down by the river. I collect cans, do odd jobs. I'm sorry, she suddenly blurted, dropping to her knees on the concrete. I'm so sorry. For the car, for betraying you, for ruining the company, for ruining myself. She broke down into racking sobs, a pathetic, broken figure. I regret it every single day. Every night, I dream of your face. Get up, I said, frowning. This is a public place. She stumbled to her feet, a sick, desperate hope in her eyes. Ethan, is there any chance? For us? To start over? I'll do anything. I could sweep the floors at your company. I looked at her, and to my surprise, I smiled. The funny thing was I felt nothing. No hate, no love, nothing at all. It was like looking at a complete stranger. The Bancroft division is doing very well, by the way. It's one of my most profitable assets. Her face went pale, but she was still looking at me, waiting. I took a deep breath and shook my head slowly. Ava, we live in 2 different worlds now. I wasn't trying to be cruel. I was just stating a fact. The tangled emotions were long gone, faded with time, leaving only 2 separate, divergent paths. I took out my wallet and pulled out a business card. Call this number. It's a contact at a social services agency. They can help you find a job and a place to live. Consider it the last favor I owe your father. I didn't wait for her to take it. I tucked it into the pocket of her worn coat and turned away. I could hear her crying my name behind me, but the river breeze quickly carried the sound away. The next morning, at a board meeting, I announced that Hayes Industries was officially expanding into the Southeast Asian market. As I looked at the excited faces of my executive team, I felt a profound sense of peace. The past, good and bad, was nothing but dust, and I was already moving on to a much bigger stage.